Sabrina 70s comic, issue 5. We start out with Della appearing to Sabrina, getting mad at her for magically fixing a little girl's doll, saying that she saw that, somehow. Why do I have to deal with this plot hole that they're refusing to fill in again? Once again, I'm asking how any other witches know about Sabrina's behavior. I guess by staring into crystal balls, but why do they care? I can't understand why, according to Della, Sabrina was given her powers to do evil with them. Why? She's not saying she's expected to do evil purely against mortals, which would be much easier to understand. You'd think that the head witch, in charge of maintaining order in her people, would have to discourage evil because it just lead to breaking the law, and witches, at the very least, constantly suing each other for said evil, and forcing the courts to be swamped with cases. Or at least constantly using magic against each other. Just because witches are known in the media for being evil doesn't mean it makes any sense to have this line be a thing, because they couldn't have a functional society that way. It's too meta. Also, why did Della get a lame hairstyle? At least she has a new outfit, but still. It was smart of Della to keep herself invisible to mortals. Della says that Sabrina's not supposed to make mortals happy. Why not? Racism? Because they don't have powers? But then she should have made it clear in the first place that she's only supposed to use magic to do evil to mortals. After all, I'm sure if Sabrina did something evil with her magic against her, she'd want to punish her, making her look especially stupid for encouraging witches to use magic for evil. I wanted Chantra instead. At least she made sense. This character is just frustrating. We get it, Sabrina's nice with her powers. It's there to make her relatable. Does it have to be made a big deal out of? It's already a big deal out of universe. That's more than enough. Della tells Sabrina that she has to appear before the witches' tribunal and have her powers revoked. Wouldn't it be much faster to just revoke her powers right away? Like she proved she could do instantly earlier herself? Why would she waste people's time instead? I guess if she only lives to spite people, then she's doing it despite the tribunal by making them waste their time. Sabrina seems to have learned her lesson from last time, because she begs her not to take away her powers when I guess she actually wants her to, since that'd be consistent to her earlier character. Sabrina's told that she's done more good deeds than the entire Boy Scouts of America. I guess she wants her powers so she can keep doing that then. So Sabrina's being spied on for how she uses magic every time. So spy witches are a thing in the series. And that has to be why no one remembers magic. Sabrina sheds tears saying that if she lost her powers, Hilda would be disappointed in her. She didn't think about this last time. This is better writing. I guess she's had time to think ahead for 2 seconds since then. Della tells her not to do one more good deed. I guess she will. Della says that she'll be watching her on the witch's closed circuit TV. Sabrina says that she's tried being evil, but her heart wasn't into it. Meanwhile, the 90s Sabrina comic had her torment her rival with magic in the first issue, which was also relatable and made sense because the rival really deserved it. You'd think she would meet someone in her school that she would hate enough to be fine with doing it. A mortal clearly looks at her while she's talking about being a witch out loud, and he's smiling instead of being confused. I guess the reason tough is misspelled is because it has to be that way to be sure enough to fit in the text bubble. But this panel didn't even need to exist, because she already made that point clear when she said Hilda would be disappointed in her. I think she'd still love her though, wouldn't she? Predictably, Sabrina will get tempted into using magic for good again, because she sees a crying child complain that a big man, Moose, busted his new racer. Wait a minute, can't Sabrina's magic use count as an evil deed if she used it for revenge on Moose? I guess she won't do that. It wouldn't make the kid happy. I mean, it wouldn't fix the racer. Moose runs after Reggie because he's possessive of his girlfriend. I'd rather see him punch Reggie than see Reggie somehow outrun him for 3 panels. 4 panels. No, 5 panels. The kid complains that his mother just bought him a racer for his birthday today. And now he'll have to wait until his next birthday to get another one. Wait, instead of Christmas? I wonder if his birthday's too close to Christmas, and so he only gets presents for his birthday, or his family doesn't celebrate Christmas. Or his family is so poor that they can only afford presents for his birthday, or more likely, the racer is so expensive that they had to save up all year to buy one. So they literally couldn't afford it until his next birthday. Somehow, Sabrina has faith in Moose to have stepped on the racer by accident. I mean, he was clumsy last time we saw him. But he's also like this. Predictably, Sabrina uses magic to fix the racer instead of confronting Moose with what he did, and maybe proving that her faith in him was justified, and getting him to get it fixed the normal way. Although an idiot like him probably couldn't fix it, but he could bring it to somebody else who could. You'd think if she cared about doing things the mortal way, she'd be able to resist using magic just fine. I knew that was just a one-story thing for the sake of the plot. So what was the point of the issue wasting so many panels on us? It was so predictable that she'd use magic for good again. Dell threatens to cut off her powers, and then Sabrina says that she was doing the good deed for evil. Dell thinks that Hilda's gullible for some reason. Then after a kid pushes his racer, Moose slips on it. Moose falls in the snowbank, as I wonder how in the world this is supposed to explain Sabrina not losing her powers the next time she does a good deed. Dell actually asks what kind of evil that was supposed to be. Why? Sabrina says that she has to start out with small spells and flatters Stella. I'm so glad it's just flattery and she doesn't actually admire her. That would be terrible. Then Midge says she's glad her boyfriend fell in the snow because now his hot temper will cool off. And as I expected, she really had slipped and fell into Reggie's arms. And Moose at least apologizes. Their relationship always made me uncomfortable. Why is she putting up with Moose? She doesn't look scared of him. I remember there was a short story arc in Archie with off-putting art where she broke up with him. And I'm guessing they got back together in the end. The worst possible ending that no one would want. Which is a perfect demonstration of why Archie comics suck, and why I gave up on them. Some aspects of the status quo are garbage that should be gotten rid of. And if a comic can't understand that, it's never gonna get better. I don't know why she would date him. I don't know why they thought Moose had to have a girlfriend. Did they think it was a funny gag that he was violently possessive of his girlfriend? Why? The story ends with Stella wondering if she got tricked by the new witch generation. And yet there's no consequences to this. I don't understand why she won't punish Sabrina for her next good deed. And why the writer thought that this kind of plot point wouldn't be horribly frustrating. In the next story, Hilda complains that she's out of bat wings for a brew. Why did she want to make this brew? I wish I knew. She tells Sabrina that she'll have to get her a batch of bat wings from the house on the hill. Why doesn't she store bat wings in her house? Why doesn't she teleport herself to the bat wings? Or teleport them to her? Why is she insisting on sending Sabrina to the house? I guess she really wants an excuse to show her what that place is like. Some people call the house haunted, but Hilda thinks it's lovely. Sabrina complains that she hates having to go to that house, as if she's actually done it before, when she was just reacting as if she had never been told to do this before. Then Archie insists on giving Sabrina a ride in his car to the haunted house, saying he's glad to help out a friend. I'd expect the loser character to be scared of the place, but instead he calls himself a gentleman who always escorts a lady. And Jughead is the coward instead, saying that he's here because he doesn't want to be alone. But it'd obviously be smarter to just take off. It's certainly nice of them to escort her, but I can't help but wonder if they're only doing it because she's a girl, which is a bit cringeworthy. Sabrina thinks that the spirits are just gonna try to drive Archie and Jughead out of here. Why though? And for some reason, her magic has no effect in their domain. Huh? I'm glad the 90s comic ditched that nonsense. Why would the Batwings be stored in a place like this then? Also, again, why are ghosts allowed to stay on Earth when that wouldn't benefit anyone and do whatever they want? This doesn't make any sense. The house starts creaking, and a knight's armor axe almost falls on Jughead. I guess that's a cliche. Jughead sees a ghost behind Archie, and is gibbering too much to tell Archie what he's talking about. Then Jughead falls into a trapdoor. Well, I guess it's a good thing the writer established that Sabrina can't use her magic here, because I would have questioned why she didn't immediately use magic to protect them, so there'd be no tension. I guess they'd refuse to leave her alone no matter what. Archie says there's a draft and wonders if Jughead decided to wait in the car. The ghosts think that scaring Archie is impossible and believe that he's an idiot and run out of the house terrified. When it's so obvious it could have just appeared in front of him. They gave up way too quickly. Why is him being an idiot scary? Why do the ghosts want them to leave? Weren't they people at some point? And people get lonely. So wouldn't they want them around? And the story ends without us even seeing Sabrina give Hilda the bat wings. At least that's unique for a story with a MacGuffin in it, which is usually the laziest excuse plot. Maybe the haunted house being enchanted is why Hilda couldn't warp to it, or warp anything from it to her. This story wouldn't have happened. Then the comedy page, Hilda's told by someone that he's checked her over and can't find anything wrong with her. Hilda says that she still feels tense and uptight. The psychiatrist tells her to let off steam and get mad sometimes. Even though you'd think he'd already know that she gets mad and lets off steam, if she told him about her life, but I guess she never told him that she let off steam before. He tells her to let off steam, so she does so, telling him satisfyingly that he charges too much and she refuses to pay this bill. He kinda deserves that because he just told her what any random clueless Joe would have told her. You'd think he would have given her medication to make her not as tense anymore. But I guess he's a psychologist instead. Coming to him was a complete waste of money. At least it was interesting to see that Hilda actually wants to change and get character development from her temper. I would never consider that she would go to a therapist. Will this ever be brought up again? I don't think she'll ever change, or she wouldn't have a personality anymore. In the next story, Sabrina walks around angsty about being different. Then she gets greeted by someone named Chuck, who feels sorry for her moping. Sabrina asks how she can get Archie and his group to like her enough to ask her to join them. Did the writer not read the previous issues? Archie and Jughead invited her to fish with them on a sailboat. Archie called her his friend and went to a haunted house with her. I guess the story takes place before a lot of the stories with them. Sabrina's told to be helpful, which was the obvious idea. But how would she have opportunities to help them? Wouldn't they say, no, I don't need your help? Does she know how to be helpful without using magic? Chuck asks for a scarf as a thank you, and she casually gives him one with magic, and he thinks he's dreaming. But he realizes he still had the scarf eventually. I guess the spy witch made him forget this. And of course this won't lead to Dell taking away her magic. Dell's stories might as well be non-canon. Obviously Sabrina would have just gone to hide, and then given him a scarf. From her hands. Sabrina tells Harvey she's got no time and is busy. He says that he wanted to see a movie, and then she immediately warps him to the theater, causing him to wonder how long he's been asleep there because he doesn't even remember coming in. Sabrina's relatable as she desperately wants to be appreciated and loved. It's certainly better to see her want to be accepted by these guys, main characters that people are attached to, instead of them doing the cliche where the main female character wants to be accepted into the group of mean girls, when they're so mean that there's no reason for them to want that. It's a shame Sabrina was too stupid to realize that obviously she couldn't just warp Harvey to the theater and have him realize that, well, she's trying to get in with the Archie crowd. She already knows that he likes her, but still, she wouldn't have been this stupid. Archie complains that he hates changing the tires in this weather because he always gets frozen fingers. She uses magic to fix it, and she tells them not to ask her how she fixed that tire. So all three of them immediately assume that they just imagined that the tire was flat. That's annoying. Why is it too simple for Sabrina to simply ask them what they'd want help with? Also, isn't it obvious that they might never think of her as a friend anyways and just take her for granted as a slave if all she does is help them with magic? Or even without magic? I'm always glad to see Sabrina use magic, but her being so clueless is frustrating. Archie says that there's such a crowd in the mall, so it'd be tough to shop. Sabrina uses magic, and then the Archie crew wonders where everyone went. Sabrina says that if they want room to shop, they can just ask her. Since she didn't outright tell them that she's a witch, Veronica just thinks she's being silly and says it's just a coincidence that everyone went home at the same time. Archie says that for Sabrina to be responsible for that, she'd have to be a witch. And Reggie says that would be cool, which at least tells Sabrina that they'd like her for who she really is. I feel Sabrina's frustration with her as Veronica decides to leave the store because if nobody else wants to shop there, there must be something wrong with the place. Sabrina goes home slamming the door and saying stupid gibberish like she's Yosemite Sam, and Hilda tells her to watch her language regardless. It really should have been Zelda saying that because who is she to talk? Sure, she's never said this, but she's known for having a fiery temper and takes pride in having bad behavior. She's not one to talk. In fact, this just makes me wonder why she doesn't swear, and why Sabrina doesn't. Sure, this is a kids' series, but the fact remains that Sabrina's a teenager and Hilda's an adult. Logically, they would swear. It's just not a thing because of tradition. So at this point, it would be weird and off-putting if they did swear, because they never did before. Because of the so-called logic her comic runs off, Hilda says that she disgraced the family trying to endear herself with powers, even to her own friends. In fact, Hilda kicks her out, and tells her not to come back until she's ready to apologize to her, saying that witches don't have friends and she should be making enemies. That doesn't make any sense. This is easily worse than Sally slapping Sonic. I bet Hilda won't apologize for this, and it'll never be mentioned again. And I guarantee you this would never happen in the sitcom. And like, girlfriends break up with boyfriends all the time. But this is her aunt. She's the only one raising her. Like, Hilda would have a point if she told her, you can't use your powers to endear yourself to them, because they can't know you're a witch. So they wouldn't believe you did it, and even if they did, they'd freak out. Or want to use you. But you can endear yourself to them without magic. But you wouldn't even want that, that's the problem. So, there's nobody that can give her good advice on this. It'd be nice if Ambrose or Zelda gave her that advice. Because Ambrose seems to be at odds with Hilda, and more likely to defend Sabrina. Sabrina uses her magic to help a dog get up a tree because he was barking at a cat, and somehow the dog talks and says that he doesn't know how to get down from the tree, and the cat talks to him as well. And Sabrina mutters as if she's mad and knows what they're saying. Either Sabrina's able to know what they're saying because she's a witch without even trying, or, coincidentally, both the cat and dog are transformed to witches. Sabrina naturally gets in a bad mood after everything that happened to her. So she decides to conjure up a tornado which will spin the unwitch-like notions out of her head. That is kind of out of character at this point, but she's had a really bad day. So it makes sense that she's trying to improve her life. Just then, Archie makes her happy, telling her with all of his friends that he's been looking for her. Because Veronica just decided to throw a party and are rounding up all of their friends. Wouldn't she have already known they were friends? And Harvey runs into the tornado and thinks he's just having a dream, and somehow everyone walks away without noticing when tornadoes make a lot of noise. I was expecting Sabrina to have to zap the tornado away to save him. Instead, this is the end of the story, which I guess was supposed to be funny, but it failed. In the comedy page, Sabrina tells Hilda that the next time she feels like she's about to lose her temper, she should count to 10. Hilda actually admits she's right. I guess she let Sabrina back in her house after the last story because she's a softie. But obviously it would have made a better ending if we saw her do that and saw her apologize and throw her a party. Obviously the audience wouldn't be in the mood to find anything funny after the last few stories. It seems like the comic doesn't know which tone it wants to go for. Every time it tries for a tense and suspenseful story, it just seems confused in tone, like it doesn't know what it's doing by doing that. Hilda gets hit by a baseball to the head, which you'd think would knock her down and injure her. But we can't even find its satisfying karma for last time, because we don't actually see it impact her. We just see a red flash of light and it bouncing off her. Okay, it is amusing to see her count to 10 while she's running towards and kicking Harvey and hitting him in the head. Because who does that? And somehow she says Sabrina's right and that did help, when obviously she missed her point. I wish she explained that she's saying this because she thought her counting was funny. In the next story, Hilda tells Sabrina that she's worried about her going out with Archie tonight. Why? Oh, good. She explains that he's a clumsy clod always getting into trouble. He is? That's better than her hating him just because he's mortal like I thought. Instead, she's just worried about her. But somehow she didn't immediately anticipate that Sabrina, of course, would use her magic to keep Archie out of trouble. Why did she even worry at all? I guess she thinks that Archie might get her hurt before she could stop him. None of the stories before this have had him be clumsy. I thought it was just Harvey and Moose. So if this is going to be a very rare flaw of his, it'll kind of be like a compressed Vice. But he's supposed to be a loser character, if the basketball story was any indication. So him being clumsy makes sense for his loser trait. I'm just saying it feels more natural to use Harvey as a clumsy character. Archie slips on the sidewalk, and Sabrina uses magic to make sure he lands on his feet. Sabrina goes into his car, which keeps on vibrating, so she uses magic to smooth the engine out. It's justified that he doesn't see that car up ahead because he's so distracted by what she just did. The car in front of them flies into the air with the driver questioning it, and Archie says the motor never ran like this before. The car grows wings and flies, keeping the spy witches busy. Archie says that this is a miracle worth celebrating and offers to buy Sabrina a soda, which is satisfying to see after an earlier story. I certainly love how unique these cars look. Though I really have to question why roofless cars were ever popular in the first place, because they're such a bad idea. What's he supposed to do in the winter? Why are they even manufactured? Archie spills the soda, and because Sabrina was smart enough to anticipate that, she uses magic to make the soda leap back onto the tray like nothing ever happened. And she plays dumb as Archie says that weird things have been happening tonight. Logically, you'd think everyone would know that weird things keep happening because of Sabrina, and so they'd attribute it to being around Sabrina at the very least. Harvey would definitely notice this. So I guess none of her friends connect any of the guaranteed weird things to Sabrina because they keep getting their memories wiped. I can't believe this hasn't been explained in the first issue because it's an essential part of the comic. Just hanging around her for one day would give it away. Archie gets handed a bill he doesn't have the money for. So Sabrina uses magic to get a bunch of money in his pocket, which he can use just fine instead of the money being called counterfeit. Doesn't every single dollar bill have a unique ID to it somehow? And so that's how counterfeit bills are considered counterfeit? Because they're all the same? Maybe that's not how it works. Magic is smart enough to get every detail right. But then counterfeiters would too, wouldn't they? Even Fairly Odd Parents made more sense, because it was against the rules to use magic to zap up money. But considering what Dell's trying to tell me about witches, it would make sense that witches wouldn't care what they do to a mortal economy, because they hate mortals. But witches being callous to mortals is just so dark for the Sabrina series. And it makes me wonder why the hell witches haven't taken over the earth then. So the sitcom made more sense by not having it be like that. Running Earth would provide tons of excuses to be evil to it, and tons of chances. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Archie surprises me by saying that this has to be the greatest date of all time. They were on a date? I was doubting it at first because it didn't make any sense, and he called her his friend. Why wasn't he with Betty or Veronica? I wish it was explained that he was on the outs with them at the time. As far as he knows, Sabrina isn't any different from Betty, being an especially nice dumb blonde. Isn't she dating Harvey right now? And she was fine with going on a date with Archie? Why? I guess we're supposed to assume she temporarily broke up with Harvey because he's a klutz. But then why is he dating Archie? I guess she's on the outs with him for some other reason. Archie shouldn't have said date because it just makes things confusing. I guess the story has to take place before she started dating Harvey. But we should have been told that from the start. Archie says he usually runs out of gas, but tonight the tank is full. So he's reckless, and doesn't ever plan ahead, which explains why he didn't have the money for the restaurant either. So he's not just accident prone, it's also his own fault. He tries to kiss her goodnight, but Hilda was hiding in the bushes, so she warps him to bed, which probably made Archie think that date was just a dream. I guess she knew to hide in the bushes because she heard Archie's car coming up to the house. This issue sucked compared to the earlier ones for the most part. The first story just redundantly reminded me of Della and her insistence on the idea that witches have to be evil with their powers, and that's why they have them. But she doesn't explain that they literally get them from someone spiteful. She also doesn't specify that she's only supposed to be evil towards mortals. But that has to be the case. If she's so evil, I have to assume she's just too lazy to take over the world and run the world. She's too busy with the witch realm. But that's just an assumption. I'm just confused and frustrated the whole time as Dell said she'll take away her powers if she does one more good deed, and of course she does. But she gets out of trouble because that good deed happened to get Moose hurt with the eraser he broke. So then why doesn't Sabrina get in trouble the next time she'll do something good? That's just confusing. How would witch society ever be functional if they're all pressured to abuse their powers? Which is the exact opposite of how a magical society would function. There's a reason I always imagine that magic would be policed to prevent abuse. The second story confused me with the plot hole right away. Why did Hilda insist on Sabrina going to get her bat wings, and from a haunted house instead of her kitchen, for a brew she had no reason to make, though it's probably just food like oatmeal again? Why wouldn't she go there herself? Why was the haunted house enchanted against witchcraft? Wouldn't it require a witch to do that in the first place? Why would you put them in a haunted house then? Why were the ghosts allowed to be there? To spite mortals? Even if Hilda explained that she put the ghosts there because she wanted security for her batwings, and she just summoned them out of nothing, I'd still think she was stupid for having the batwings so far from her house. It was certainly nice of Archie and Jughead to insist on trying to protect Sabrina. I didn't expect that from them at all. And I know, it might be dismissed as sexist. It's probably just because she was born a girl, and it is the 70s comic, so that's probably the case. But I'm just grateful that they're being nice enough to accompany her when they could have easily not done that. It's always a pleasant surprise that they go out of their way to help her. But the ghosts gave up on scaring Archie way too easily. They would have just went in front of him. That story was stupid. The third story, while making Sabrina sympathetic and relatable, was mostly frustrating and confusing. Because of course, she stupidly insists on helping the Archie gang with magic, but she's not capable of thinking ahead for even 2 seconds somehow. They never believe she did it, and they're not allowed to be told how she did it. Why didn't she expect that? Why is she thinking she's not liked and accepted by them just because she's a witch? The sailboat story proved that she's just a normal friend of theirs. Wouldn't she have gotten used to believing that by now? Finally, she gets invited to a party by them. She should have just asked how she could help her friends, and done it without magic. The whole thing happened because she was an idiot. What happened to her wanting to do things the mortal way? Finally, there's a good story, which is to say completely harmless. Sabrina goes on a date with Archie, and uses her magic to help him the whole time, from his car troubles to his bill. And he says it was the best date ever and thinks that a bunch of miracles happened, instead of being put off and freaked out by her. The only real problem I have with it could have easily been avoided if they omitted the word date. I immediately got distracted by wondering why they're on a date, because they're both taken. You need to explain the premise of the story or it'll be too distracting. I think it could have been Harvey instead of Archie just fine. If they're both clumsy, then the only difference is that Harvey seems to be nicer than Archie. They basically have the same personality, but at the same time, it was more interesting to see her date Archie instead of Harvey. So I guess that was one of the best things of the story. It made it stand out. Really, I just liked it because Sabrina was being nice to him with magic a lot. When she does stuff like that, it makes the fact that she's a witch look worth it. Like it was a very good thing she was born. It makes reading the comic worth it. This is what I mainly look forward to.